everyone, it's Tani Games here. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, hello and welcome on in. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the entire showcase, looking at all the details and seeing if we can uncover the secrets of the showcase. Now, the showcase was, in my opinion, absolutely incredible, and it was miles above what the last showcase was. I do think this is going to be a very tough one to beat, especially in terms of like my aesthetic and what appeals to me. This showcase really hit the nail on the head. So let's take a deep dive and try to break down all the information we saw. In this video, I'm going to be discussing sort of new fruit and veg options that are coming to the game, new foliage, looking towards the future of Act 2 and other little details that they showcase to us. So let's begin. We are going to start with the expansion news and move on to the free content stuff later. So let's begin by looking at some of the new foliage and crops coming to the expansion. Now, I do want to first express that these are my assumptions. They're conclusions that I have made based on the information given. However, ultimately we won't know factually till the expansion releases what everything is. But I think we can make some assumptions. I think our first major clue comes from the dishes we see on display in the showcase. We see a plate of olives, some sort of red cabbage and cauliflower dish, a creamy based yellow dish with what I'm dubbing as swirl berries. There seems to be a plate of tzatziki, some sort of porridge dish with a golden apple on top. I'm assuming it's porridge, it might not be, it could be anything. We do also see some pancakes with a persimmon on the top. We see some green beans, a chopped potatoes dish, a fruit-based pie, and a fish dish, which possibly has olives and maybe pickles or maybe a zucchini on the top. We then also have a dish which to me looks like chia pudding with fruit on top, and also potentially a cinnamon type cake, which I did debate if this was carrot-pita, because that does look like it uses cinnamon based on what I saw online, but a lot of the images were of a much darker cake and less cream. But I also looked at Greek honey cake, but I'm not sure if that uses cinnamon, and again, the lack of cream. So I don't actually know what this cake is. I was just trying to guess. I can't work it out. Also, I do have to stress cinnamon is an ingredient from the Rift in Time. However, in ingredients, we don't necessarily need to use specific ingredients to still craft an item. But nevertheless, with these recipes, we can sort of guess what types of ingredients we might see, especially when paired with other visual clues within the showcase. The first one I have mentioned, which is persimmons. When I first saw these, I assumed they were oranges, but then I saw the persimmon pancake dish and I'm convinced that's what we're getting. I think that's what these orange fruits were that were hanging from the trees. Like I said, my initial guess seeing the orange colour was that they were oranges, but after seeing this fruit in an actual dish, I've got to assume that these persimmons are actually what's come into the game. We also have the olives obviously on display, so logically we can conclude these are coming to the game, and we do see some trees in Mythopia, which I do think are olive trees based on their appearance. Now, the red cabbage and cauliflower dish was interesting. We do actually see a cauliflower being planted, so that's pretty much a huge indicator and confirmation that we're getting cauliflower in the game. And whilst not confirmed, I would assume perhaps we're getting maybe like a red cabbage or perhaps a purple kohlrabi. I'm not entirely sure, but I was looking at different variants online, and to be honest, it really could be any of those. Without seeing visually the crop and other stuff like that, it's hard to guess, but something along those lines anyway. We also see a dish which immediately screamed chia pudding to me. We did have chat kind of guess that perhaps it was going to be Greek yogurt, and I did get that vibe. I do understand that when tied to kind of like Mythopia. But after we see the farming clip, there's a mysterious plant with some purple flowers on it, which originally we were talking about as lavender, and my only concern with that is I would consider lavender as more of a flower than like a crop to grow. So I was kind of hesitant, and after Googling what a chia plant looks like and seeing that it has purple flowers on it, I'm convinced that was like a chia plant in the ground being farmed, and that the dish we see is basically a chia pudding. We do also see clips of other crops during the showcase, and some other crops get mentioned without being shown. So as I mentioned actually earlier, we do see this mysterious looking strawberry which looks a bit swirly. So I've officially dubbed them as swell berries. I'm not sure Gameloft can come up with a better name, but we'll have to see. These appear to spawn in the Ever After biome. These do look very, very cute. I do like them. I think, yeah, they're a sweet item to have come to the game. Very interesting in their appearance. I did Google if there were like strawberries that come swirly, but I couldn't find any. So my Google search history is a bit messed up at the moment. But yeah, so I'm calling these swirl berries from now on, but these look super cute. During the clip where we see him farming, we do also see a couple of other mysterious crops. We see a pumpkin looking item, which we do have pumpkins in the game. So perhaps this is a type of squash perhaps, or I was looking at different like pumpkin variants, and apparently there are pumpkins called Cinderella pumpkins, and there are also pumpkins called fairy tale pumpkins. And I think the name of those just make them perfect additions to Storybook Vale. I would absolutely love if we could grow and harvest some fairy tale pumpkins. I just think that would be super fun. Now, during a clip where we're showing Merida in the bind, we do also see an orange plant with some orange balls, can I say? I suspect it's perhaps like a cherry tomato plant, perhaps like an orange variant of it. I did Google, apparently there's a lot of different orange tomatoes out there, which I was not aware of. Apparently I have no knowledge of vegetables. I'm only used to red tomatoes, and I always thought the ones that came in other colours, like when you buy, I don't know if you have it, where you buy the little bags of cherry tomatoes and they come in slightly different like yellow and orangey tones. I just assumed they were like less ripe ones, which doesn't make sense actually, because when tomatoes grow they're initially green, so why would I think that? My granddad used to grow tomatoes, that's how I know that, because he used to grow tomatoes. But yeah, anyway, yeah, I'm assuming these are just an orange cherry tomato or something like that. I couldn't think of anything else when I was Googling in terms of orange plants that had a similar style in terms of how they look. So yeah, that's why I've gone with that. We do also see some form of wheat. I'm thinking perhaps this is going to be a variant that is basically durum or rye. Sort of something that's a bit differentiated from the standard kind of wheat that we have in the valley. It has the same sort of appearance. So I was looking at the different types of wheat crop type things, and I think based on its appearance, durum or rye are probably the closest guesses we can have for that. We do also see in the background of a couple of clips, we see a green crop which does have some green balls on them. Again with the balls. My initial thought was that these were Brussels sprouts. it just had that vibe to me. But perhaps these could also be artichokes, perhaps green grapes. Although I would expect if they were grapes that they would be on a vine. I think I was just sold on the green grapes idea because I was thinking of like grapes and their tie into like Greek mythology and other stuff. But given that they're shown in the ever after, I don't think that's gonna be the case. So yeah, I think I'm more leaning towards the Brussels sprout theory or something similar to that. Now they also mention and showcase some green beans and porcini mushrooms, which was fun to see. Great to know that those crops are coming. But when they talk about this, they also mention ambrosia. Now, I have heard of ambrosia, but I don't really know a lot about it. My first knowledge of ambrosia actually came from Edward Scissorhands, when the neighbour lady says she's going to bring her like famous ambrosia salad, which I don't actually know what ambrosia salad is. It does seem to be an American thing. It's certainly not very British. So yeah, that was like my first knowledge of ambrosia. But ambrosia in Greek mythology is basically the food or drink of the gods, and there's a lot of difference of opinion as to whether it's a food or a drink. I've taken this from Wikipedia, but it basically says ambrosia is very closely related to the gods' other form of sustenance, nectar. The two terms may not have originally been distinguished, though in Homer's poems, nectar is usually the drink and ambrosia the food of the gods. It was with ambrosia that Hera cleansed all defilement from her lovely flesh, and with ambrosia, Athena prepared Penelope in her sleep so that when she appeared for the final time before her suitors, the effects of the years had been stripped away, and they were inflamed with passion at the sight of her. On the other hand, in Alcman, nectar is the food, and in Sappho and Anaxandrides, sorry, I can't say half of these, ambrosia is the drink. So it says, a character in Aristophanes' Nights said, I dreamed the goddess poured ambrosia over your head out of a ladle. Both descriptions could be correct, as ambrosia could be a liquid considered a food, such as honey. And this is what kind of stood out to me, was that could we be getting some form of honey come to the game in the form of ambrosia? I suspect we might get honey when Winnie the Pooh comes, which I suspect he will come eventually in the future. But this might be what they have in the meantime. You know, we do have a lot of similar style crops in the game, so it's very possible we could see a sort of alternative to honey. We do also see during the clips, there's actually a yellow goldeny kind of pot on display on a table. Now we know that we can put resources on a table, so could this perhaps be our first look at the ambrosia? I'm very, very intrigued to find out and see. Now, in the bind, we're also told about some of the fish we can catch, which is koi, seawolf fish, and sea grapes. So we could see these used in some recipes as well, like we typically do with fish within the valley. Now, I'm excited to see which other fish come to the biomes. If you have any predictions at all, let me know in the comments down below of what you think we might see in terms of fish coming to the valley. Now that we've talked a bit about the food items, let's talk about some of the resources in terms of sort of like harvestables in that sense, and also the flowers and foliage. We are told about some resources in the game. We are shown in Mythopia that we get some poppies, some buried lightning strikes, and bougainvillea, which does, by the way, look absolutely stunning. I'm probably going to decorate my entire valley with it. We do also see a herb in the background when our characters walking past, or their characters walking past. I'm gonna guess perhaps some sort of sage or bay leaf, but it's very hard to determine. It's a very, very short clip in the distance. I can't quite exactly make it out. We do also see a variety of different cypress trees in yellows and greens at different heights and slightly different shapes. We also do see some broken down pillars which appear to be on display in Mythopia, possibly as a mining item that we can remove, similar to the bones or the mushrooms from the base game valley. Moving on to the Ever After, which comes with, in my opinion, some of the most beautiful flora in game. We get some beautiful bioluminescent moss, we get giant flora, and the mushroom flora is just absolutely stunning. It does appear to glow at night, and during the day it does look a bit more natural looking for some of the mushrooms, which I do love. And I do love that there are going to be different heights of mushrooms. You know, I just adore that little sort of attention to detail, that we have some low to the ground pieces which are going to be great for a more realistic and sort of natural design, but also the larger and the glowing pieces which will be eye-catching in basically any mythical, fairy or witch core type build. It appears we have large glowing purple, green, and also some spotted purple mushrooms which are very, very tall, which, yeah, these look fantastic. I guess these are kind of like this biome's equivalent of trees. We do see some trees, don't get me wrong, there are trees in the biome as well, but I guess based on their stature and their height, they're sort of like a variant of that. But we also do see some smaller ones which seem to come in like a glowing beige and a glowing green, and also some really dark purple ones which look similar to either like a chanterelle kind of style of mushroom, maybe an oyster, I think more chanterelle, but yeah, it's that kind of vibe. It does also look like we might get some sort of fiddlehead fern inspired plant as well. I'm assuming for decor, though it could also be a flower. We do see some large flowers as well in this biome which look absolutely fantastic. And lastly, we're also shown Flynn Rider, but we see a bush behind him which is kind of like in a green tone but with these vibrant red flowers on it, which I think looks nice and is probably the round bush equivalent or variant for this biome. Now, in terms of breakables in this biome, there does appear to be some moss covered, and I couldn't work out if they were broken cups or broken teapots, which, as I said, I assume are the breakable objects, similar to how we would mine up the bones or break the coral and things like that. Now, when it comes to the bind, we do see a variety of orangey and yellowy sort of toned trees, some with books in the tree trunks, some with paper in the leaves. We also see some gorgeous orangey red bushes with these lovely little white flowers, which absolutely looks gorgeous, and I can't wait to introduce those items to my sunlit plateau for my fall inspired kind of like fairy core build. I think they're going to add a lot of dimension, because at the moment we only really have the red trees, and I think this is going to add a lot more texture and dimension, as I said. So I'm very excited to get that and add it to my base game valley. But it does appear that we have a very, very unique style flower crop, which comes with books attached to the root. Now, I'm assuming these are a flower and not like a decor item. Just something about them feels like they're more akin to a flower crop. At least that's my impression. It does appear we also get some smashable rocks with leaves on them in the bind, so a bit more standard and typical of a mining rock. Well, not the mining rocks we get gems from, but you know, the spawning large rocks we have in the valley. We do also see some pine cones, and I do wonder if these are going to act like a wood resource as something that drops from trees. Perhaps it's just a crop item you can harvest, like the spawnable herbs. But in the Rift in Time DLC, we do have cinnamon drop from trees, so it would be interesting to see if the pine cones are the storybook veil equivalent. Now lastly, something that unites the biomes is the ink spills, and that obviously directly ties into the storybook theme. Obviously books are written, well, now they're done electronically, I would say. Maybe some writers out there still use pen and paper, but you know, typically we associate pen and paper with books, and obviously ink with that. So seeing these ink spills across the valley, it does look like we get a resource from them when she harvests them, but I couldn't identify what it was. It just looked like a black semicircle. Now I don't know if that is actually the resource or if it's just a placement render, and we'll see the true resource when the game's released, basically. Or the expansion's released, but I'm very, very intrigued. And these ink spills are basically the replacement of Splinters of Fate or Night Thorns in the Valley. What I love about these ink spills, it's just so reminiscent of Epic Mickey, which is such a beautiful game. I played that years ago and I was absolutely obsessed with it. In fact, there's two of them. There's Epic Mickey and Epic Mickey 2. I do highly recommend playing those games. They did do a remaster recently. I obviously played it when it first came out on the Wii, and oh my gosh, the controls weren't the best, I'll tell you that. The controls were very difficult, but I absolutely adored that game, and yeah, it was great to have a game that, like a Disney game that didn't feel childish, which I think Epic Mickey and Kingdom Hearts do very well. They don't feel very childish, whereas there's a lot of Disney games out there you can play that just kind of feel like they're for kids. So yeah, definitely recommend those. Now a big thing to get into is the decor, which sadly they don't actually tease us with a lot here. I'm actually pretty gutted about that. They definitely leave this as part of their surprises we can uncover. However, we do get a few brief glances of a chair and sofa set in this gorgeous autumnal tone, and they do happen to mention talking about dressing up as a Greek god or goddess. So perhaps we could see some chitons, I don't know how you say that, peplos and himatians. So perhaps variants of those could come to the valley. I am a wee bit concerned that they seem to mention exclusive items to owners of the DLC. Now, they do say that items will be available in the Scrooge store to owners of the expansion pass. Now, the way they specify owners of the expansion pass makes me wonder how Scrooge store visits are going to work in terms of sharing items. That was a big appeal when multiplayer came in, was the fact that people could visit other players' Scrooge stores to get items that they weren't having show up in their valley. So I do wonder if it's just going to show up as unavailable for purchase, or if our storybook veil shop will have a different rotation of stock. I feel like that might be a bit more trickier for them to code into the game, perhaps. I mean, I don't know exactly. But it was something that kind of stuck out to me as something to maybe be a bit wary of, especially because for a lot of players, they don't necessarily sit there on the wiki like I do, checking out every little bit of information. So I imagine there could be a lot of day-to-day players who could come across an item and say, hey, I already own this, do you want this? And invite someone to their valley, and then they can't play it, and then or buy it, I should say. And then it causes confusion and things like that. So I don't really know how they're gonna tackle that, but we'll just have to wait and see. Now, speaking of the Scrooge store, we do actually see Scrooge's store and Remy's restaurant have a nice redesign to better fit into its surroundings. I do love that it fits in so well with the bind. However, I do have a little concern. In the trailer, we see Chez Remy in the Scrooge store with a backdrop of Mythopia. Now, I'm not sure if this is placed in the bind with Mythopia in the background or it is actually placed in Mythopia. But the design is still the bind's design. It doesn't change to a design that fits Mythopia. So I am a little bit hesitant that perhaps the design doesn't change to fit the other two biomes. Now, I do appreciate that's a big ask. So it isn't me like trying to be like majorly criticizing. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or say this is horrendous or rubbish. It's just merely highlighting a detail that I noticed that could be potentially seen as a little bit negative. I do find that because of the autumnal colours, I do wonder how that's going to pair against something like Mythopia and Ever After, which doesn't have an autumnal vibe to it at all. In fact, I would argue that Mythopia is a very springtime biome, and obviously the Ever After is a darker biome. So I think those autumnal colours might contrast a bit too much for it. So we're going to have to wait and see. We know that their previous trailers often show stuff that isn't entirely accurate. So we could be wrong. Perhaps the buildings do change because they talked about it fitting in with the biomes. So to me, that implies that it would change. But also they don't show that change. And they don't really specify that it does change, just that it's going to fit in more. Do they think that the design fits in more with those other two biomes? I don't know. Maybe that's a very subjective thing. But it was a detail that I noticed and thought was perhaps worth mentioning. And of course, speaking of buildings, let's talk about the houses we see. So we only get confirmation of 3 house skins. We see Merida's house, we see Flynn's, and Hades. Now, Merida has an absolutely stunning and gorgeous cottage. It does appear to have some transparency on the bottom, so I think it really could fit into any biome. I was watching Trisha's Lovely Games do her reaction to the showcase, and she did mention about it fitting into the glade, and I think she's 100% right. I could definitely see it fitting into the glade of trust. But it is a beautiful house, and I do think it would fit into a lot of places. Now, Hades' home is probably a slightly different matter. It's probably a bit trickier with some of the yellow colours on his house. Like, there's a lot of bright, vibrant yellow tones to it, which I'm not sure why that is, actually. I assume just because his house is in Mythopia, but, like, I just kind of didn't get it. I thought it'd be a bit more reminiscent of how it looks in Hercules, which doesn't seem to have the yellow on it in Hercules. So yeah, I was surprised by that, but I do think it's a very, very fun and unique design. Obviously it does take some inspiration from how it looks in Hercules, but it's just the colour. Now, I do think when we see his house, we also do get a sneak peek at some new furniture. Possibly a friendship reward, but we do have these glowing lights outside his home, which do match the ones attached to his house. But I don't think these ones at the front are part of his house. I think because of the way they stand on the path in front, I think they're just a furniture item. So perhaps, as I said, perhaps a friendship reward or something like that. Now, moving on to Flynn's rustic looking house, which I do have to say fits in beautifully with Rapunzel's tower, and it does appear to look like it would blend in nicely with the Snuggly Duckling Tavern, of course. It does look like they've included some apples on the side for Maximus. At first I couldn't work out what these were when I was first watching the showcase. I think I thought they might be giant carrots of some sort or pumpkins, but looking at it in further detail and in different lighting, it does look like they might be red and not orange as I first suspected. So being apples for Maximus makes a lot of sense, I think. They also include a little wanted poster on his house, which I think is an absolutely beautiful and fun little detail. And as a bonus, they did confirm that owners of A Rift in Time who have befriended Rapunzel should get a cute reunite interaction between the two. So I'm very, very happy about that. Now, we don't see anything to do with Maleficent or Aurora's homes, but given that they're not coming till Act 2, it's not very surprising. I do hope Maleficent isn't tied to the DLC by having her castle be the castle we see in the sky. That is one of my biggest annoyances with Jafar, is that he's tied to that castle in that realm. So even if I wanted to bring him to my valley, if I wanted all the characters we get to come and stay in my valley, I cannot do that because he's tied there. And I think that was very poor on Gameloft's part. They did say they've learned from the original DLC, so I'm hoping that is one of the things they've learned from. So fingers crossed Maleficent has a physical house we can move. And secondly, I hope that Sleeping Beauty does come with her castle, because she deserves a castle. Even if she spent the majority of her film living in the cottage, she deserves a castle. And I hope that the Briar Rose Cottage comes as a premium shop house skin, because I think that would be so cute to decorate with. Why don't we move on to the critters? We do seem to have sort of like 6 new critters coming to this expansion. They're only 3 are technically like equipable as companions. The other 3 unique sort of critters that we see, they're going to be things that we can catch with our new tool, the Royal Net. So the 3 companions that we can equip and hang out with are going to be owls, dragons, and Pegasuses. Or maybe it's Pegasi, I don't know. But these all look absolutely adorable. I love that the owls look more typical to owls, because I know that was the biggest theory when we first saw one of the new little like snippet creatures, was that was going to be an owl. And I must admit, not overly impressed, because I was like, it doesn't look like an owl. But it does look cute. It does look cute, no hate, but it didn't look like an owl. So I love that the owls we're getting are actually owl-like. Obviously, the dragons look super iconic. They look so amazing. Having a little, like, pet baby dragon is just the cutest thing. We do see it in a red colour. I am excited to see what other colours we get. I hope we get a blue one. Perhaps we might get a black one with some, like, green specks to it or something like that to tie into Maleficent. And perhaps we might get a purple one. Perhaps as like a little Spyro nod. That would be fun. But the dragons look super cute. And obviously, then we do also have the Pegasuses, which obviously inspired by Fantasia, which was actually one of my big predictions. I remember going over that in like my predictions video and guesses and stuff like that, and like obviously I zoned in on how much Fantasia could potentially be an influence. So to see these actually come to the game, I was just so happy. And seeing the blue one specifically, because we know blue is my favorite color over here, so I was just like, yeah, I was ecstatic. And like I said, so happy to see some of my predictions come to life in this expansion. Now let's talk about the other 3, which are the snippets. These come in the form of like a bird type creature, a frog, and some kind of like cheeky little sprite or imp type creature. These do seem to come in a variety of colours, with apparently some unique rare ones which might visit our original valley. Now these come with unique ways to capture them in game, so we only see our character run up to the creatures and swing their nets. We don't really see a difference in how they're caught, so I'm curious in how this is going to work. Perhaps it's going to be similar to interacting with companions, like the foxes that you have to chase, or the squirrels which you just simply approach. So I'm not sure, it'd be interesting to see. Now when you do catch these, they allow you to access a puzzle minigame from the lore keeper. Now this appears to be a torn tapestry, and the minigame works very much like a jigsaw puzzle. It does seem a lot more simplistic than Scramble Coin, which might make those players who found the Rift in Times minigame tricky a little bit happier. Now, for me, I personally liked Scramble Coin. I didn't find it too much of a challenge. It reminded me a lot of Checkers, which I think is probably the most simple of board games. But I am an absolutely huge puzzle fan. So to me, this is kind of like the standard, the basics. So I was a lot more sort of able to get to grips with it. But I know for people who aren't big fans of puzzles, that don't do puzzles very often, you know, it would be a bit more trickier to kind of think ahead and think of your steps and what your characters can do to move. So I get why others had a bit more of a harder time with it. Now for me, obviously I hope this new puzzle doesn't feel too simple, because I didn't find Scramble Coin tricky and this looks a lot easier. But that being said, the appeal of having these beautiful tapestries like to hang in my houses definitely has a lot of appeal. And of course, speaking of the tapestries, I'm hoping the ones shown offer a sneak peek to the future designs of characters in the game. We do see a Sorcerer Mickey tapestry, so I would love to see a Sorcerer Mickey skin come to the game, just like how we got our Steamboat Willie style design of Mickey. I think a Sorcerer Mickey would be fantastic. We do also see on the Sleeping Beauty tapestry, we see Aurora featured a couple of times, but each time she's only featured in a blue dress, which does make sense because the majority of the film, she's in the blue dress, not the pink one. However, I don't want to get my hopes up too much that she does come in the iconic blue dress, because she is pretty much always shown in pink. So I don't want to get optimistic and then be left really disappointed. I do hope if she doesn't come in blue naturally, that Gameloft basically offer the option of a blue color alternative for her, or perhaps offer it in like a future update or something like that. I just feel like she needs to be in blue. You know, it's her true color. It's her true color. And speaking of Aurora, we do see a lot of what appears to be hidden passageways. And I do wonder if these could perhaps be passageways to Aurora in the second act of the DLC. We do know from what is alluded on the content roadmap that we have to go sort of like underground to find her. So I do wonder if these are the passageways to her potentially. I wonder if she is going to be encased in fawns, since when we see the sneak peek of her character's silhouette in the floor work, sort of like the stonework, we do see a bunch of fawns around her, which obviously is a fantastic reference to the film when Maleficent encases her home in fawns. But it would be nice to kind of see that storyline revisited here in Dreamlight Valley. Now, my other thought was also the gazebos we see dotted around at various points in the trailer. These seem to have a strong relevance to basically the locations, the setup of this valley. But what's interesting about these gazebos is that when we look at some of the gazebos appear to have some sort of clock turner device in them. Now, originally when I saw one of these devices, which we saw in one of the sneak peeks, I thought it was like a day to night turner, like because of the clock hands, but I don't think it's going to actually work as as something like that. I think it's going to act as almost like a cogwheel that you interact with these clock hands, and perhaps they open up a passageway. And so perhaps this could lead to Aurora. Or my other option is that alternatively, they lead to the trials, especially because they're in so many locations. I'm thinking this could be the pathway to the trials. Now, the trials do seem to be similar to the temples or dungeons that you get in a lot of RPG games. It seems like we need to use our tools to sort of navigate the maze of these trials. Perhaps we have to solve a couple of puzzles on our way through them. These are apparently inspired by fairy tales and myths, so I'm excited to see how these are going to differ. And what sort of fairy tales or myths they might reflect. Now, the trailer talks about unraveling riddles and revealing hidden secrets before showcasing some armor statues. Now, I do wonder if these are perhaps going to be rewards from either the trials or the minigame. Based on the backdrop, I would assume the trials, but it could be that they're a reward from the minigame. I'm assuming they're a furniture item. I wasn't sure if it was displaying some clothing, but I think perhaps furniture might make more sense. So yeah, that's all I have for the breakdown from the expansion stuff. Now let's move on to the base game. There's not a lot to cover here. The base game was the smaller section of the showcase, and let's start with one of the biggest highlights of that, which was the floating islands. Now, these expansions to the game work a little bit like I kind of thought or guessed. I did originally wonder if we could terraform our valleys by adding additional islands to the valley. I just couldn't work out how we would get to them. I knew we wouldn't get terraforming in the sense of removing ponds and stuff, because they're so tied to quest lines. I think that would add too many complexities to the game. But I did think we could terraform in terms of changing our landscape up by adding valleys around our island. And we do sort of get that. These additional islands, they are classed as extensions to the valley. However, they are separate. You do have to travel to them via a fast travel, so it doesn't look like they're going to be something that we can sort of see attached to our valley landscape. It's going to be something that we kind of almost get portaled through to. The good news is that they can have their own unique item limits, which they did confirm. So this is great for the users that are restricted on the lower item limits. You're going to be able to have so many different kind of item limits. It's basically not going to hold you back in terms of decorating, whereas if they just expanded the valley, those that are on a lower limit wouldn't see much benefit from that as far as I'm concerned. So it's great. I think this is the best way around it. These floating islands are going to be a similar size to their valley counterparts, which is great to hear. And it does look like the floating islands are surrounded by water, which potentially means we can also move those villagers that are stuck in water placement. We do see it sort of surrounding the plaza island. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad it means that we could move probably literally every villager over to these islands. Yeah, I just think that's absolutely fantastic. Now, we do also get 4 islands to begin with: the Plaza Island, the Forest Island, the Sunlit Island, and the Frosted Island. So it's exciting that we do get a variety of backdrops to work with and start with, and these might cost 15,000 dreamlight each. We do see the cost of 15,000 dreamlight for one of the islands, but we also know that in-game the cost of dreamlight to open up each biome changed. So perhaps the Plaza Island could be a cheaper unlock. We don't know. But what I would say is I would sort of be cautious and tried to save 15,000 dreamlight for each one. So in total, you're going to need about 60,000 dreamlight saved up to unlock all of these. As I said, it could be that potentially the plaza ones, you know, the forest ones are a little bit cheaper. They could be scaled, but the only indication we have is this 15,000 dreamlight. So better to be safe than than sorry. Now they do imply that we're going to get more to the game in terms of these islands. So I do expect we'll see ones to match the Glade, Dazzle Beach, the Peaceful Meadow, and also the Forgotten Lands in future updates. And I do think it would be nice if eventually for players with the DLC to basically gain access to DLC specific ones. We'll have to wait and see for that one. I think that's going to be potentially a long-term kind of investment perhaps. That isn't anything that's likely to happen soon if it ever did. I think we can pretty much guarantee, you know, the Glade, Dazzle Beach, Peaceful Meadow and Forgotten Lands to eventually come. But as I said, it would be nice for those that own the DLC to get ones to match those islands. I just think that would be so much fun. We can also bring our friends over for valley visits to these islands, so I do hope that this potentially opens the door for visits to the DLC worlds as well. Now, the next big announcement that they had was the addition of item rotation. Now, this has been one of my biggest asks since day one. I knew it would obviously take work to implement, but I knew it was very possible given that the game is built on a grid system. So you just need to alter that grid system to match the diagonals, basically. That's all. So it does take work, but it was possible. It was nothing that I ever looked at and went, that would be impossible to ever come to the game based on its setup. I knew based on the grid setup that it would be possible. I mean, it's a grid. Like, it was definitely going to be possible. But yeah, I'm glad that they've put the work in to get this to finally come to the game, especially because when they first announced changes to decorating, this was what I expected was going to come, and apparently, well, I mean, we know it wasn't what came, and apparently what did come was what everyone else wanted, but the rotation was what I wanted, so I'm so glad that it's finally coming here. And obviously we get 16 points of rotation, which is just incredible. 16 points is a lot of rotation. So yeah, it's going to be incredibly customizable. It's a way better rotation system than what I expected. I did not expect as many as 16 points, so that's incredible. At the moment, it's just applying to furniture, landscaping, decor, homes, and sort of like the resources and droppable items like food dishes and stuff. Which is a lot, don't get me wrong, that's a lot already, but it should eventually extend to fencing and pathing, which when it does come to pathing, I'm very excited to see how that improves the flow of walking through our valleys and builds. I'm very excited to see the potential that can do. So yeah, I'm ecstatic about that. I think that was one of the biggest base game announcements they could ever make. To me, that's bigger than the floating islands, and the floating items is pretty incredible. But this was my biggest ask, so I'm so glad it's finally here. Now, next up, let's talk about Sally. So it does appear that Sally's update might bring in some new recipes. At least we definitely get one with the feature of the Jack Skellington biscuit on the table. I am hoping we get new Scrooge items along with her friendship rewards. We do know that's definitely going to include a bed and some socks. And it is heavily hinted at that we are also getting her dress and rug as part of the friendship rewards. We do also see a couple of furniture pieces in the background. These already feature in Jack's house, so I'm hoping that these are additions to the Scrooge store and not her friendship rewards. Now, what's interesting is about her introduction to the game. I'm not sure she's coming via fabric scraps, as I initially said. They do mention creepy, crawly messengers, which oddly gets said as we zoom into some cobwebs. So, could we randomly see spiders in this update? Could they add spiders to the game? I'm quite intrigued. My other thought was that she does come in fabric scraps, but fabric scraps formed to look like creepy crawlies or something, and that's how she gets reunited or pulled back. I'm not entirely sure, but there's definitely something a little bit spooky going on there. We do also get hints of her quest line and sort of the missions we have to do. So we do have to do a date night. It mentions doing some quilting, so I hope we get some cute like quilted items, a bit similar to how we got the Pumbaa pottery items. I hope we get some like adorable little quilted, whether they're like quilted blankets or like plushies, or I don't know, some sort of item. I think that would be very, very fun. And then we also have to puzzle her latest premonition. I'm assuming this is going to be more of like an interaction with other Valley characters, perhaps Jack Skeleton specifically, and we have to make sense of what she sees. Now let's talk about the star path. We did get a sneak peek at the next star path, which leans into a fairy tale, ethereal, seasonal theming. We see a new clothing item in the form of a long coat. We see this gorgeous blue gazebo adorned with flowers and snow. I'm a little bit gutted it has snow on it, because whilst I do love that little detail, it does mean that this item pretty much only works in the Frosted Heights, which we know my beef with items that can only work in certain biomes because of that. I do wish it didn't have the snow, just so it could potentially be placed in other biomes. It's my big issue with the frozen trees, is that, you know, they got snow on the bottom, so you can't move them over without it looking a bit silly. So, but it is a beautiful structure, don't get me wrong, it is beautiful. We do also see a new style of crafting table, which I'm not particularly fussed at. I'm not the type of person that, well, I do place crafting tables outside, but usually spontaneously. I don't have set up outdoor builds where I specifically put crafting tables. So to me, it doesn't necessarily fit as such. I'm not going to use it outdoors. It doesn't need to blend in with the biome. So it's not something that I'm super fussed about, but I mean, it's an item, you know, always happy to get new items. We do also see some sort of large ice structures. These don't really have any sort of specific shape, just kind of ice. So I'm assuming these are meant to be like an outdoor kind of decor, maybe like a decorative foliage kind of item, but in the form of ice. And lastly, we do also get a new accessory, which was one of the things I was incredibly excited about, and it's going to be absolutely awesome in Dream Snaps, and it's a wand which produces snowflakes. Now the wand itself looks stunning. It kind of looks a bit Glinda wand-esque, but in a more blue tone, but it does absolutely scream like snow fairy princess, and that is just the perfect vibes for me. Because if I could be one thing in this world, it would be a snow fairy princess. Now next we do have to move on to the content roadmap. I do believe this roadmap implies, after Sally, that we get 2 new realm door openings, as well as a conclusion to the Skull Rock story. We do see in early 2025 a reference to exploring a whole new world, which to me can only imply exploring a realm. We do also see Jasmine's headband and Aladdin's hat, which means it looks like we are gaining 2 characters from this update. The next update comes in spring 2025, which showcases the Cheshire Cat in his like shadowy, invisible state, and we just see his eyes and mouth showing. Now this update references stepping into a land of wonder, which I think obviously again implies going into another realm. What's fun about this is in the tagline it says meet new friends, which is of course plural, so I think the biggest likelihood is we are getting Alice this update, as well as the Cheshire Cat. I mean, I just can't imagine them bringing in the side characters first without the initial main character. It doesn't seem to follow the typical pattern that Dreamlight Valley has. And lastly, we do see an image of Skull Rock, and the tagline for summer 2025 says solve an ancient mystery and discover who is waiting in Skull Rock. Now we do have a clue as to who that character is, and that's shown by the feather in the ground, which matches the feather that sits in Peter Pan's hat. So I think this is obviously confirmation of Peter Pan. We do see the shadow of the Forgotten, so I think it's likely they're going to have some involvement in the storyline and opening up Skull Rock. But I don't see any other clues in the image, so it's unclear if this update would bring more than one character. I'm not going to get optimistic for Hook or Tinkerbell. They could very well come in another update, perhaps a realm door or something like that, I don't know. But for now, I think it's only implied that one character is coming. Well, lastly, for the final secret of the update that I've sort of spent a lot of time deep diving into, we do need to go back to the very beginning. It's something I've mentioned in my 5 things you might have missed video, but I figured it was worth mentioning again. You might not have seen that video, so again, I do think it's worth a mention. We do see during the countdown to the showcase, the Scrooge store featuring 2 new clothing items. One being a cottagecore style dress, and secondly an outfit which appears to match Raya's outfit. Now I do hope this is confirmation that the Scrooge store is going to get a massive update with clothing items, because they are so desperately needed. So I'm hoping this is our teaser that we are getting more clothing items added to the base game. I think I'm going to be able to be tied over with the update, with the expansion, and being able to get some clothing items from that. But I'm hoping the base game also gets that update. And there we go. I think that's all the little mysteries and hidden details of the showcase that we have dissected and tried to solve. Now, if you spotted any cute hidden details that I've missed, be sure to leave them in the comments below. I absolutely love this showcase, and I'm beyond excited for the future of Dreamlight Valley. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, and I do want to say a huge shout out and thank you to all my subscribers, especially my channel members. Your support means the absolute world to me. I love this little family we have in this tiny corner of the internet, so thank you all. I do hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye guys!